welcome to episode 2 of the All Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Bowen, and I'm joined, as always, by Daniel, Abdul, and Marco. We just got done watching episodes 5 and 6 of The Last Dance, and I have to say now we're kind of getting into more of the Jordan stuff. You know, we touched a little bit earlier on Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson, but I think these two episodes really went in depth about Jordan and his runs, especially his 1992 title against the Blazers and the 93 one against the Suns, and of course all throughout the backdrop of the 98 title run. So I'm going to jump to Abdul first. What are your, first couple of things that pop up to you when you're watching these two episodes?
All right. So first thing I want to say is I love how much it highlights Jordan as a cultural figure. As great as he was on the basketball court, I feel like his impact from a cultural standpoint was just so much bigger than the player he was. When it comes to the shoe market and how everybody views sneakers now, how much Nike really took off having him on their side. The idea of players having their own shoe line, having all these God knows how many endorsements that he had. The idea of having that image and trying to maintain it, and then also on his part the scrutiny side of it, when the gambling stuff came up and all the scrutiny that he faced and everything, there's so much things that we scrutinize now because of the social media era and how much people are able to record things everywhere they go now, that as I was watching it, I was watching as I was thinking about it, how would it be today? You know what I mean? And just comparing the two, because it was such a different time, and I can't imagine how players back then would have managed now, because we see the players now and it's kind of it's our norm, you know what I mean? And we expect them to suck it up and everything and whatnot, but to see Jordan just be completely tired of the media. Obviously he's not the first player to be tired of the media, but to just be tired and be and then you hear Magic saying you guys are gonna drive him out of the game and all that type of stuff. It was so interesting for me because you look at I'm not trying to create comparisons, but even in regards to, I'm gonna stray from LeBron, we'll say Durant.
Okay.
Durant is a really scrutinized athlete. Probably aside from LeBron, he might be the most scrutinized guy for any decision he's made on the court, and he's so different from he's pretty different but also open to people as far as the way he is and who he truly is, in a sense, that he gets scrutinized for being a certain way. And I was trying to think of it yo, imagine if Michael was in today's day and age. You want to talk about being driven out and whatnot, not saying the media drove him out, but just the attention and everything. Of course he got so much attention, but the level of it is just so much higher now, because it's not just the media that watches you, it's people who are able to watch you and record you and post what you're doing, and it's so much easier to spread rumors and everything. From that standpoint, it was just really interesting for me.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to have if Michael Jordan had Twitter back in the day, right? And if he was growing up in this age with Twitter, could he have crafted his narrative around that gambling in a different way? Because back then he had only his one, Ahmad Rashad, that NBC Sports reporter, that seemed to be his main reporter that he could relate to. They were in the car together, smoking cigars, having a good time, and that's what those athletes back in the day needed, because you had hundreds of other ones writing whatever they could get from his sound bites every day, and it absolutely must have been draining. So yeah, I think Twitter would have been beneficial for him back in the day, but it also could have opened up more can of worms when he was out gambling and the media didn't catch it. But if there's Twitter, you could just hear something and he was actually out in Atlantic City 2 straight nights and not just the one night.
Yeah. And then
more reports about that.
Might have had one thing. So actually 1.5. Kind of going on that, especially in regards to the gambling, the fact that he was scrutinized so much for doing it when it wasn't an illegal thing that he was up to. He wasn't getting in trouble with the law or anything. It's kind of the way people view certain things was also interesting to me, because athletes nowadays don't gamble and whatnot on the, like to things similar to what Jordan did. As far as like a change of times or whatnot, and like the things that athletes are now more careful of people being able to see, like because of things like that have happened to guys in the past, such as Jordan, was also interesting. And then last one I thought was important was like the social justice aspect.
Yeah.
You see like a lot of guys now like they're rolling towards like being able to like take a stand for what they believe in and like trying to stand for what's right and all that type of stuff, and like they're not as worried about their image, but at the same time they know that their image is more protected in the sense that like easier for them to do it in today's world than it was then. Obviously like for Jordan, like in the 90s, this to a worse extent as far as like the way things were seen and like how it could really test the public as far as like their view of him. And also the idea of like not like every athlete not being able to be an activist was also something that intrigued me, because obviously the guys today aren't the first guys to be doing stuff like that, but then Jordan's also not the first guy to not be taking a full out stand for like his people, and so to say. So yeah.
Yeah, this part really struck out to me because I think Jordan allowed with his doc for us to see the last glamorous part of the championships, of the titles, and that's a very interesting conversation until today. Athletes do not have to take stands if they don't feel like it. If they just want to play, that's good. Obviously, when a guy like LeBron does, which is the first guy that comes to mind, I think it's better, for his image, for everything, for what he represents. But we have to be reminded that these guys are paid to play basketball. If that's what they want to do, fine with that.
Yeah, I think there's kind of an expectation for athletes, but especially black athletes, to come out like and use their platform in support of things like civil rights. And you know, Jordan said, I didn't see myself. He thought what Ali did was great, obviously, but he didn't see himself as an activist. Saw himself as a ball player. But yeah, like comparing to LeBron, I mean, LeBron, when his Last Dance comes out in 30 years, instead of having this part where he's quoted saying Republicans sell sneakers too, or buy sneakers too, sorry, it'll be like, look, LeBron opened a school, and they'd show like his more than an athlete thing, you know. So it is interesting. Like Michael not standing up kind of reminded me of OJ in a weird way, because it's like this commercial superstar loved by white people, and he refused to stand for something political. Like OJ was asked to join like Ali, Bill Russell, and Kareem and fighting for civil rights, and he didn't do that. So it's kind of, I don't think it's like something that should be held against Jordan, but it's something that should be pointed out, because he failed to be the athlete that transcended sports in that way.
Oh, 100%. Like for LeBron, like he's really like he's championed for that a lot. Especially like for being able to like help his community and everything. I know there may be people who think like he does it for cameras or whatnot or whatever, but like there's always people who say that type of stuff. But at the same time, like you have to consider like people of that like on that type of a pedestal don't get to do anything off camera. Like they just don't get that chance, especially in today's day and age. Like if LeBron does something, like everybody knows about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when people know when LeBron comes to Toronto for Carabana weekend. Like there's no running from the cameras or like people knowing about certain things. And like you're definitely right as far as like that idea of like being transcendent, because that's something that like really pushed Ali in his career too, as far as like him having to like get his way out of prison and then coming back to be a champion. It was kind of like that rise fall like concept of a story that like people just adore hearing about, you know?
And people hated him at the time for
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
over time, like, now it's, there's that one quote, like, Ali is going to be remembered forever, Jordan might not be, which I don't think it's true, obviously,
Yeah,
but it's still interesting. Like Ali will be remembered for more than he's more remembered for his activism than he is for his boxing.
Especially like even if you go into Ali record, there are guys with better records in boxing, but Ali is considered the greatest because of what he was outside of the ring.
Yeah.
Jordan's like significance is like globally. They said he had an impact on the Dream Team because other countries could watch him play and all that. And then I think his shoes is honestly the biggest thing he's going to be remembered for in a way in like 30, 40 years. Because I think Jordans are going to still exist. I mean, they've
100%.
like massive. But yeah, like when you're comparing, like if you want to compare two boxers, the first thing you're going to come up with the league, yes, but this is what he did outside of the ring, blah, blah, blah. And when you're comparing Jordan, it's just, it is kind of just strictly basketball talk. And it's nothing like, well, he supported Harvey Gantt and he got the first African-American senator like elected, right? But that didn't happen because he was just strictly basketball. And I don't think there's a problem with that. But that guy who said, the name escapes me, the guy who said that Jordan won't be remembered in 30 years. I mean, I don't buy that.
Well,
he'll be
it was
remembered, but for different things.
It was easier for him to be able to say that in the early 90s compared to now.
Yeah.
But like in terms of Jordan, it's more so like he was this guy who became a hero. It's like, will he take a stand for us in a sense? Like you always, like, it's easier now to be able to say, I wish he would do it, but I don't expect it of him because there are more people who do it, but there wasn't as many at the time. So I guess like that also plays a factor as far as like the criticism, because he became so much bigger than people thought an athlete could be, like globally.
And he was huge in the Black community, as we saw with like the Spike Lee stuff and that scene from Do the Right Thing. And then he didn't speak out, and I can see it probably was disappointing for a lot of the Black community at the time. But it's totally fair. And he said, I don't feel comfortable coming out against something about something I don't really know about. That's the thing, right? He said I don't really know about what I would have been endorsing something that I wasn't like informed on,
Mm-hmm.
which like you could say is irresponsible, right? So I thought that was a fair argument.
But I think what's the most amazing is that he lets those things get into the documentary. He could just say, "Oh, don't put that because it's gonna make me look not that good." Whatever, just put it in. His mindset for things is kind of riveting. Like you can love me or you don't, and if you don't, you're like what Jay-Z says, either love me or leave me alone. And Michael kind of embodies that.
Yeah, I mean, he said at the start that it's going to make me look bad, but it hasn't really made Michael look bad at all yet, because every question that pops up, it's going to go back to Michael Jordan, and the question is going to be posed to him. So he's going to have a response to everything this documentary brings up, which with other people, like Jerry Krause, unfortunately, he passed away, so you're not going to hear his side of things. I mean, in the ideal world, you would have every single person kind of respond and craft the true story. But it is nice that they bring up, these kind of interesting issues. The one interesting one was Horace Grant. And Michael's like, no, Horace leaked that all to the media. And Horace is like, what are you guys saying? Like, I didn't do that at all.
There's always like that like tug of war type game as far as like who said what. Like we see it so much even now, because like everything is sources said, but nobody knows who the sources are. And like so many people are like, who's this source? Who's that source? Like who's telling me this? Who's telling me that? And I don't even think like people will ever be able to figure those things out, because no one wants to be like known to be the person who actually leaked information. You know what I mean?
D'Angelo.
Wait, what?
D'Angelo Russell. But I mean, I found that was weird too. Like Horace Grant denies it, they blame it on him, but it doesn't really seem like it affected team chemistry. At least they didn't really touch on that. It's like, yeah, it was Horace. but it's like, then we still got on the court and played team basketball and won games, and everything was fine. I thought that was weird.
Yeah, it's just a way to just drum up a little bit of controversy, and then you look at their record and you're like, oh, wait, what? No, like, this wasn't as bad as you're making it look out to.
Like, even in terms of, like, BJ Armstrong's, like, the stand he kind of took, he was like, it wasn't just Horace. Like, it could have been front office, it could have been ownership, it could have been coaches, it could have been this. And he kind of just, like, spread all the blame out to, like, anybody who possibly said something in the organization. Kind of shows, like, how much can really go into, like, certain things being started. Just because, like, you never actually know. Like, these guys spend so much time with each other, and, like, they still aren't able to tell who said what. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting.
But still, like, as you guys were saying, it's funny because this last episode made the 1998 season seem like a very troubled one for Chicago, but it ended up winning, like, 62 games. So, even with all the scrutiny, they were pretty good still. And I think that's a very good job on the documentary, actually, because it feels like the task of winning the 6th championship is super high, and maybe it was not that much. They were still the best team in the league.
I mean, like, it's hard to, like, sustain, like, that level. Because, like,
Yeah, of course,
it shows,
of course.
like, I can see your point, and I can see both sides of it, like, in terms of, like, how they made it look difficult, but then, or it seemed like it was difficult at first, but then how quickly they were able to turn it around. But at the same time, that's like a mark of a great team, kind of like turning it on when you really need it to be on, and like they did just that, like, every step of the way. And like the idea of like three-peating for a second time, and like kind of like with all the cliffhangers and everything to it, even though we know the result of it all, it's kind of like that was really cool to be able to see, because you kind of like feel like you're almost a part of it, even for those of us who didn't actually get to witness it.
And they never had a game 7 in the finals. But
Yeah.
every time the game up, it's like, oh, are they going to lose? I'm like, wait, no, I know they're going to win. But, it makes it sound like it's a possibility Jordan might actually lose this one, right?
Talking about that, guys, why do you think was the best team that they faced in those first 3 championships? In the Lakers, the Suns, or the Blazers?
The Suns.
Yeah.
That Suns team was ridiculous. And I know a lot of, like, I know Charles Barkley is like this ridiculous TV personality and all that, people, like, that's how people view him to be. But like, I think people forget like how great of a player Charles Barkley really was. Because like
How slim he was too. He was surprisingly skinny.
Like, I think his listing is at like 6'6", 250. And like man, like he could play. Like he has career averages of 22 and 11, which is not easy by any means. There are a lot of Hall of Famers who are below 20 points a game for their careers. And like, for them to be able to show like he was league MVP, like how good the Suns were, like they had the best record in the league that year too. And also like his insight as to like, this was another thing, like him saying like, I felt like I was the best player in the league until Jordan outplayed me like in parts of the finals.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, because a lot of people get it twisted as if like Jordan was like the one guy, and I'm like, no, like he wasn't the only one. Like there are a lot of Hall of Famers who came out of that time and that had to face Jordan in the finals too. And like Barkley's one of them. And like if it wasn't for the fact that he didn't win a ring, like he's still a top 5 power forward in my opinion ever. Like he's literally one of the greatest players ever. But
Yeah.
people overlook everybody because Jordan won 6 out of 10 in those years, and he didn't
exactly,
even play
like,
2 of them.
A funny exercise, like erase Jordan from the 90s, and that's maybe the best decade in history because you have no dominance from any other team. You'd have like a lot of guys winning 1, 2 championships and sharing every year. But Jordan happened, and he was so much better than everyone else. It's not the other guy's fault. They were all still really good. Because, for example, let's use LeBron again. What if Dirk doesn't beat LeBron in 2011? How would we remember Dirk? Would anyone play?
It's a similar thing for sure.
Yeah.
Like Barkley, I think people like when people will look at all-time greats, people aren't gonna hang like the no ring on Barkley's head too much. it's an understanding that Jordan was just that dominant, and like Barkley was an incredible player. One thing they kind of glanced over was Barkley's role on the Dream Team. He led the tournament in points.
Wow.
Yeah.
It wasn't Jordan. So like, and he was like a star after that. Like arguably, I mean, not more than Jordan, but like it was his coming out party.
From a global sense, yeah.
And yeah, it was a good Suns team too. Like Kevin Johnson was a really good player. Dan Marley was good. But yeah, they would have like that LA team was probably the worst team the Bulls faced. Just because it was an aging kind of Magic team and there wasn't really much else to it.
I'm pretty sure.
Sorry?
They were dealing with injuries too, that like going into the finals. So it was like,
yeah. And like the 80s Lakers are like, I know Magic was like star of the show, but like Kareem was there too, which is a huge factor. Like there's no Kareem in those 9-1 finals either.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and that Blazers team, I mean, I've kind of always overlooked Clyde Drexler as I understood he was a good player, and I was looking back in his stats, and like, okay, yeah, like he would put up 25, every game, basically.
Yeah.
But he got, thoroughly outpaid by Jordan, and then he won a ring, but he teamed up with Hakeem to win a ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's funny that he was compared to Jordan.
Yeah, well,
no way that was earned.
In that season, like 1993, he had 19 points a game. Jordan had over 30. It was not a comparison. No, it was not a fair comparison to Jordan.
Wasn't it the year before?
Clyde.
No, that was the year
Clyde
before.
Comparing him.
That was the year after. 93 was the year after. So that's
92.
Like,
yeah, 92. Sorry. That's true. My bad.
But like, that goes to show like Jordan just crushed his spirit and he put up 19 a game the next year.
It was. I think it was easier also to do that because like Clyde came into the league a year before Jordan did, so it wasn't like they were far apart as far as like age and experience, and like the two guard position has never been like one where like there's like 10 guys who are like you may like lay claim to being like all-star caliber or all-stars or all NBA players. Like it's always been a position where like decade by decade there's only like those couple guys at most. So like I could see why like they were compared in a sense. Because like
we can see it now. Who do we have today? Which two guards we have like they are really good today? We have James Harden, which could be also a point guard.
Depends where you place Harden, yeah.
And Klay Thompson, which is definitely another level. But like Booker is always coming, but he cannot translate that to wins. Bradley Beal the same thing. The two guard position is kind of hard to play.
Well, no, it is. And it was funny too, like when Clyde, they passed on Jordan because we had a really good rookie named Clyde Drexler, but he had 7 points a game that year. And I'm like, even if you had a good rookie, why don't you pair them together? Maybe it was just the fact that big men were like so dominant that GMs didn't think of like having two guards will actually make my team good.
Yeah, that's like that shows the times, I guess. It's like, we already have a two guard. Why would we draft another guard?
Yeah, and then the Cavs go around and draft 2 point guards that are kind of like, but they try for like the best prospect available.
Like, I could kind of see it, I guess, because like Jordan was a star coming out of college, but like as you guys said, they did value bigs a lot more, and like even in today's game. Like I feel like even though there aren't like many dominant bigs, like it's still kind of like a premium in a sense to where like if there was like an elite level prospect that was a center, like we saw at the draft that Doncic and Trae Young came out of a couple of years ago, like DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley went 1 and 2.
Great decisions.
Like
yeah,
actually, you could compare it like. The Suns passed upon being able to get Doncic to pair him with Booker, to pair Booker with Ayton instead. And while Ayton's a good player, Doncic is on a different level, right?
Yeah. Even with Doncic's coach from the national team.
Yep.
Which is just, yeah.
The idea still carries forward as far as like like needing that one big. Like even though it may not be as prominent as it used to be, it's kind of like if I can get this dominant big, he could change everything for me.
And most of the busts are kind of bigs too. You know, you're obsessed with size, so then you take a Sheem to beat a Greg Oden, and then they become a bust.
Anthony
Yeah, yeah, that's a big one. And you don't see that as often with guards.
Yeah, like Portland passed up on KD to get Greg Oden, and I'm not knocking Greg Oden because he had so many injuries, but like Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant, so.
Well, they had Brandon Roy, and they're like, oh, we need a big to pair with him.
Yeah.
Right? The same.
The logic
logic.
still carries on 30, 40, 50 years later. Like I don't think he'll ever change in that sense.
There was a very funny story about KD in the draft combine where he was the only guy who couldn't lift. I don't know how many pounds was that. Yeah, and he was the only one guy who couldn't lift it, and guys were laughing on him on that. That's crazy.
Yeah, clearly it matters.
Yeah. Yeah, and so going back to, I read part of that Sam Smith book, The Jordan Rules from '93, and it was like quite explosive, but just in the way he written it, it was a lot of like not facts, but he would, I guess, just do a lot of wondering and questioning within the book. That definitely opened up a lot of opportunities for clickbaity type of stuff that comes out of it. And I don't know if we see that now as much anymore, having, like, but obviously books I don't think have the same impact as they do back in the 90s.
I think like the reason for that is because like we're all able to like research for ourselves with like the snap of a finger because we all have our phones with data and internet everywhere we go. And like if somebody's wrong, then there's at least somebody out there who could figure out the actual truth. Whereas like back then, like it was so difficult because like you actually relied on newspapers to be able to have that accurate information, and there was nowhere else you could really go to because you can't. It's not like you could read the newspaper and be like, let me figure this one out myself, and then like go grab a book because there's no book for it, or like vice versa. Whereas like if it's in a book, then it's like where else can I go besides like maybe the newspapers or other books?
Like I still think like articles come out though that are behind the scenes article. Like you'll just randomly see some article come out on The Athletic and it'll detail like behind the scenes of what was going on with the Warriors in 2018-19 or the Celtics with everything that was going on with Kyrie. Like a few months after everything happened, there'd be some report like detailing something juicy. So I still think like the investigative journalism side of things it's still real.
Oh, 100%. It's just that if you're a journalist now, like I feel like you have to be more on point just because people do have that much more access to information. And like players are also able to speak for themselves without actually needing the media.
Yeah.
Like they have Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, they have Snapchats that people could follow, like they're able to like there are outlets like the Players Tribune or like they're able to tell their own stories. Like you have to be like obviously there will be rumors that still fly, but and everything can't be fully accurate in that sense. But like I feel like there's that much more of like a reason to be accurate now.
Yeah, you're gonna get called out if you get something wrong.
Yeah.
Which is good. I understand the reasoning, but when you have like sources said and that's like an inflammatory comment, it just kind of frustrates me a little bit where it's like, how legit is this source, And like we're never gonna find out because if that source tells them who they are, they're gonna lose their job. And so like we as like consumers want these juicy stories, but at the same time, like there's a lot of those sources are, I don't think would be the most legitimate if their names were leaked out. But that's just the way of doing media now, right?
Oh, 100%. Like, if I heard like an equipment manager says something, or like, no, actually no, I won't say equipment manager because they may get to hear everything. I want to say maybe a front office member that isn't as that you wouldn't suspect to be as close with the players.
Like a
Then it's kind
marketing
of
director or something.
yeah. Then it's kind of like, okay, what's the catch in you saying this? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And then like everybody starts going after that person. It's kind of like we need answers, and then teams have like all sorts of publicity they probably want no business of.
And apparently the sources do that, especially like when it comes to draft time. Like they already have their player, but they'll slip to a reporter. Oh, like say that this guy's the guy that we're searching for.
Yeah.
Kind of like lead the other teams on a wild goose chase, essentially.
That happened a lot in the NFL draft.
But us the whole time we're like, oh, this could actually happen. This could actually do this, and then something else happens. But it's an interesting
No.
chess match for sure.
Yeah, definitely. There's one thing I was wanted to bring up that I felt really came out in this episode, or these episodes. As you said in the intro, like this was about Jordan. We were finally hearing about Jordan, and even though I knew all these stories, it was just crazy to hear and watch the vindictiveness of Jordan. You know, like comparison to Drexler. Oh, you know, like I was so mad. It takes everything so personally. It's so funny. And then like Kukoc, like who cares?
Yeah.
But they took it so personally and went so hard. And then Dan Majerle, like he's like, oh, they called him a good defender. Like no one's saying he's better than you, but he's like, oh, and he needed to rip his heart out. The competitiveness is unreal.
I was thinking about that and trying to make comparisons with other sports. There is none, you know. I think there is nobody like Michael Jordan because the guy he just liked competing, and you can see like the video they were throwing coins in the floor, and he was like super passionate about it, and he didn't want to lose. Like all the stories, they really seem to be real, you know. The guy was really he really had a competitive maybe a problem. He was like problematic with that.
And he said it too. He's like, I don't have a gambling problem. I have a competition problem. And, there's that one kind of sobering moment where he's in this hotel and he's like, no one wants my life. And you're like, well, I mean, honestly, the way that the one guy summed it up of how he's bombarded the second he leaves his hotel room until he gets back.
Yeah.
And the only solace he has is in that little hotel room, like on the road or when he's at his own home. And yeah, like that must be immensely draining. And people could say, oh, well, there's a price to pay with being famous. But, I don't think anyone wishes that upon anyone to constantly be harassed every moment that you're outside.
Like I can't imagine for the athletes now who like which pod it was on the Knuckleheads podcast. I can't remember who I think it was with Nick Young actually. He was talking to Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles and like asking them how like if they were actually like in the spots in LA and like actually be able to have fun. He's like, oh yeah, 100%. Like we used to like be able to do this, and nobody knew about it. And he was like his reaction was like priceless because he was like, it's almost like you can't do anything now without people seeing you or like it being reported somewhere that you were at this place or doing this.
Yeah, and like, clearly, I mean that was the case for Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles, but back then it was like only Jordan had like such a spotlight on him that it could be comparable to athletes today.
Oh yeah.
And I just think like, you were talking about the Twitter age. Jordan already he was pushed to the limit. I mean, it's going to be revealed next episode that he was pushed so much to the limit that he actually decided to step away. And there's a bunch of rumors related to that, but assuming that was what did it, Twitter would have been hard. And like, older players are so quick to call new age players soft. you could argue there's like a mental toughness you have to have now that goes way beyond what they had to deal with.
Oh yeah, because they'll never know what it's like now. Like, for the most part, like, if they get any slander, it would be like for who they are now, and some people forgetting who they were back in the day. But like, as far as like actually being a pro athlete, like, I think that's why like a lot of like the mental health stuff and whatnot comes out as well. As far as like being able to like actually keep yourself sane in a world where like people follow you everywhere and are capable of following you everywhere without like there being like any lines or rules as to like what's out of bounds or not. You know what I mean? And like, because people could basically do what they want now. Everyone has the power to be able to record stuff. Everybody has the power to post things. Everybody has the power to say what they want online. Like, even if you go on Twitter, like, you could say some outlandish stuff, and like 9 times out of 10 you probably get away with it unless you cross like some ridiculous like line that Twitter's just like, nah, you can't do this. Or like same thing for Instagram, right? And like that freedom that people have also puts like athletes in a tougher position in the sense of like, well, what is out of pocket for people now? Because like if I say this out of pocket, they all call me soft, and then the social media sites themselves don't really do anything about it. But here I am having to deal with it, you know?
Yeah, but commenting on that, I think a lot of what the old players call softness, it's a lot to do with the game as well, because you see just some images and it was way more violent. But yeah, I agree with you. I think growing up in this age where whatever you do is filmed and posted on Instagram, you gotta be tough mentally to have like millions of followers every day and seeing everything you do.
I think as far as the play stuff goes though, like I think it's kind of harder to be able to say like people are softer just because like those are like the rules in place. You know what I mean? Like guys in the 70s could probably like get away with like would get away with a lot more. Like if a guy today gets into a fight, you're easily getting like a week's worth of a suspension. Like
Yeah, it's
at the
not their
least.
fault that you're soft, because if you
Yeah.
are hard, you're gonna get slapped with fines and suspensions and lose
You're
money,
costing
right?
your team now. Now there's a whole new level of like scrutiny. It's like this guy wants to be fake tough, and you end up getting suspended. He calls his team this and this. You can't really win in today's day and age.
Yeah, no, very true. Yeah, that'll wrap up episode 2 of the All Hustle podcast. Be sure to check in next week where we'll review episodes 7 and 8. And be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts.